And of course, welcome to PM Express tonight. The NDC, the Rawlings factor, a conversation with Professor Kwame Ahwoi. It's in focus tonight on PM Express. And this is a man who almost attained mythical status when it comes to Ghanaian politics. And of course, my colleague, Kojo caught up with him and did a fascinating interview. We thought we should bring the full interview so you could chip in and hear, especially during the time when there's a lot happening within the ranks of the NDC with the appointment and formal unveiling of Professor Nana Jane Opoku-Agyeman. Let's go through what we know as far as what you're about to watch is concerned. And this is coming a day after the NDC's unveiling. We are beginning to learn a bit more about the process leading to the decision to select her and how Professor Opoku-Agyeman was not actually the choice of some, including founding member Professor Kwame Ahwoi. And so that is a fascinating point to follow as we get to learn a bit more from this interview. Now, he's also a leading member of the party, right? Professor Ahwoi recounts how his relationship went sour with founding father of the party. I'm talking about former President Rawlings also in this interview. Pretty exclusive stuff on the show tonight. He says he's not the pocket master who controls the party. Many actually see him as the person who wields so much control in the NDC. He disputes that. He says that's a myth. But he says the running mate, Professor Nana Jane Opoku-Agyeman, was not his choice. And I guess that confirms it. She wasn't his choice, but she still gets to become the running mate, and possibly confirms the fact that she's really not the pocket master, at least not for now, not anymore in the NDC. He also says in this interview about to watch that the NDC candidate, John Mahama, could have been a better president. What a thing to say. But he argues quite forcefully for this during his tenure and shares how John Mahama has learned his lessons for 2021 if he gets the nod on December 7th. He explains this in detail, why he believes John Mahama could have been better and the lessons he's learned, for which reason he believes possibly if he gets elected again, he brings all that experience back into governance for a last and final term. So, of course, tonight, a conversation with Professor Kwame Ahwoi live on PM Express tonight. After the break, my colleague Kojo sits with him. You've seen bits and pieces of this, but the full interview here on PM Express. Stay with us.
Picture this: a young lecturer, an academic, a technocrat with an interest in politics is suddenly recruited into government. Years later, he becomes the pivot around which his party revolves. This could have been the story of Professor Atta Mills. It could even have been the story of Professor Nana Jane Opoku-Agyeman, but it isn't. It's the story of yet another giant in the NDC. In this rather rare encounter, I am privileged to spend some time with the man who is seen to be the shadow master of the NDC, Professor Kwame Ahwoi. What a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you very much, and welcome to my home.
Thank you. And of course, we're here because you've done something. You've written quite a book. Working with Rawlings by Kwame Ahwoi is going to turn heads. You have explained a lot in your book and revealed quite a lot about your time in government with former President Jerry John Rawlings and about your relationship with him. I want to start from this point. What is your relationship with him like today?
It is not the best. We actually have not spoken for about 10 years. But we are civil to each other when we meet. And when our mother died about 4 months ago, he actually came to the 1 week celebration and met with us and solidarize with us and sympathize with us. So I should say, yes, we are fine, but we are not as close as we used to be.
What made you decide to become a member of his team?
Again, I've explained in the book that by 1979, the country was actually at the edge of a precipice. Things were so bad, and I myself had decided to leave Ghana. I had gotten an appointment in the University of Zambia, and they had sent me a ticket because a colleague, a friend that I met at the University of Oxford, had become the dean of the law faculty at the University of Zambia, and he had appointed me to the faculty. So I was just about to leave when June 4th happened. And we had all heard of Rawlings and his vision for the country when he staged his May 4th mutiny, and he had articulated what he thought was wrong with the country at the time. And some of us sympathized with his views and sympathized with his vision. So when I heard that he had taken over, I said, well, maybe this will be a turn for the good. Let me stay and see what I can do to help. So I abandoned my trip to Zambia. I never went, and I stayed on, and when he invited me for June 4th, I was only involved in what we call the Hupemba Committee that investigated the implosion within the police force. That was my major activity during that period. But subsequently, on 31st December 1981, when he staged the revolution, he actually announced my name on air that I should report at Gunda Barracks, and I did report. And the love affair began from there.
A love affair, which lasted for many decades.
Oh yeah.
Until until it wasn't a love affair anymore. Now, in this book, you are very candid, and you call the former president a megalomaniac. That's fighting talk.
Well, but don't take it out of context, because I said he appeared as a megalomaniac. But if he was a megalomaniac, he was a megalomaniac Ghana needed at the time. That's what I've written in the book. And it is true. We needed a strong leader. We needed a leader with charisma. We needed a leader who could turn the country around. And if that is what we call megalomania, then that was who he was. But if you have another word for it, maybe you can supply it to me.
I mean, the word megalomania invokes, thoughts of a power-hungry person, someone who doesn't want to let go of power.
Yeah.
Was that Rawlings?
I have explained in the book again that from our dealings with him, or my dealings with him, he was not very keen on letting go of power. And it was with a great deal of convincing that we were able to transit into constitutional rule. And I always give credit to the late Justice D.F. Annan and Captain Kojo Chikata. They led those of us who thought that we should transit into constitutional rule, and I'm glad that they were successful. But maybe he was not too good a megalomaniac, because at the end of the day, he gave in. Many of his colleague heads of state who came to power like him
held on,
and are still holding on. So I think we must give him that credit.
How difficult was it to convince him?
We were all making analysis, conjectures, etc. The Eastern Europe had collapsed. The communism was shredded. The Berlin Wall had come down, and all over the world, it didn't look like revolutions were succeeding. And we formed the view that the country could not be in a state of permanent revolution. And therefore, whatever we wanted to do, we had to do it within a constitutional framework. And therefore, for us, it was very important that we transited from a revolution to constitution. And that is exactly what we were trying to do with him.
And he came without a fight, or?
As I said, it was difficult, but at the end he gave in. The one thing about Rawlings was that he listened, But I think because of his background as a military man, even if he agrees with you, he will not tell you that I agree with you. He will create the impression that he is sticking to his position, but the next day you see that he has, come around to your position. And I think that was a good on his part. But that was one of his styles.
You were a member of a cohort, if you like, the Kwesi Boches, the Kofito Tobikwaches, your brother, in fact, your brothers.
My brother, Kwesi, was not really part. It was Atu.
It was Atu, really.
But Kwesi was not in politics at the time. He was in the public service.
That's right. Yeah, and then of course there was Professor Kwesi Boche and
Ubeda
Samwa and all of you. Who do you think former President Rawlings was closest to?
I think that in the period of the revolution, it was Captain Chikata. They both had military backgrounds. They are kinsmen. They are related in some way. They spoke the same language. And I think that Rawlings looked at a certain point, looked up to Captain because of his international exploits in the military field in Angola and in other places. Besides, Captain is known as a strategist and a tactician, and so he consulted with him a lot. So I would say that in the revolutionary era, I think he would be his closest confidant.
So out of the cohort of yourself, Captain Chikata, Kofito Tobikwache, Professor Kwesi Boche, your brother Ato, out of that cohort, who would you say Rawlings was closest to?
It would depend on the circumstances and the sector you were dealing with. When you were dealing with security and intelligence, I think he was closest to Captain Chikata. When you were dealing with the economy, I think he was closest to Kwesi Boche. When you were dealing with the bureaucracy and the technocracy, I think he was closest to P.V. Obeng. And when you were dealing with legal and constitutional issues, he was closest to Chikata and I.
Yeah. Who would you say he had the best relationship with? If he would listen to somebody, who would it be?
I think I would put my bet on Captain Chikata.
Why is that? What was it about their relationship?
Well, as I say, as I know it, they come from the same professional background. They are both military men. They are kinsmen, actually. They are related by blood in a way. They speak the same language. And they had been friends for a long time. I'm not even sure if Captain Chikata did not know something about the 31st December Revolution. I don't know for a fact, but he may have known something about it, in which case they may have planned some of the things that would be done after the revolution had succeeded. So that's why I think that he was closest to Captain.
Right. The revolution came as a surprise to you?
No, it didn't come as a surprise to me, because at the time, the Liman government was really in a bit of shambles. I myself belonged to Liman's party. I was a member of the PNP youth wing, and I was very active in it. Captain Chikata himself was a member of the PNP. But it didn't look like Dr. Liman was in charge of the party, because the rumor, not a rumor, he was actually not a CPP person. He had contested in 1954 elections on the ticket of the opposition, the party that was in opposition to the CPP. His uncle also, Imori Gala, was the one who actually was touted as the leader of the PNP. But on account of his membership of the CPP, he had been banned from holding public office.
Right.
And so he was the one who brought Dr. Liman, who was not very well known within CPP circles. So he emerged as a leader, he won the elections, and you could tell that there was a cabal within the CPP that was trying to control him. And he was trying to resist that control. And so it became very difficult for him to assert himself and to enact the necessary policies that would move the country forward. I'm sure that you must have heard of the Kuchre Bekoins, the Kofi Bachas, and others. They were really calling the shots from behind. So he was seen as a very weak leader who was not in control of his party, and he therefore was not able to take control. Expectations. You know, Jerry Rawlings and the AFRC, they had raised certain expectations that the country could be turned around. But people were not seeing Liman as managing to turn the country around. And people began to yearn for change. So when Rawlings came, it was seen as the change that was needed. And I think that is why it succeeded.
Now, I want to jump ahead in your book a little bit because I don't want to give away all the juicy parts in the middle. So go out and buy one. But jumping ahead to the post-military rule and the political shenanigans of constitutional rule, you and many of your cohorts very easily switched to support Atta Mills as the future of the party. You identify that as perhaps the start of the difficulties in your relationship with Rawlings. I wonder if you could walk us through a little bit of that.
You know, in part of the book I have explained that the politics of Rawlings' succession was always going to create a difficulty because as a party we had not sat down to discuss a succession plan, even though we knew he could not run again after 2 terms. And so there were a lot of people who were jostling for the position of successor. And I think that he himself was finding it difficult, you know, to handle that, you know. And I believe that his way of resolving it was to throw his weight behind Professor Mills, who was his vice president, and hence the so-called Swedru Declaration. Now, remember that the 2000 elections had been fought by the MPP on the basis that Atta Mills would be Rawlings' poodle if he became president.
Yes, yes. That comment.
The slogan they crafted was "Vote Mills, get Jerry free." You know. Now I don't know whether Jerry Rawlings himself believed that slogan, but it was as if he thought that with Atta Mills in the saddle, he could be dictating events from behind. Now, those of us who knew Atta Mills very well, we knew that the MPP was making a very big mistake because he's a man made of steel. He has his own ideas and he is very difficult to manipulate. So I think that when he got into office and Rawlings realized that it was not that easy to have his way with him, you know, the problems had started, but I think at that point they got magnified, and that's when really the problems began.
So that sort of transition was poorly managed in your view?
Well, I don't know whether I should say managed. There was an omission to manage, you know, because as I said, the party did not have a succession plan. And one thing I didn't say, many within the party also saw Mills as an outsider. You know, in 1996 when he was brought in by President Rawlings. So if Rawlings was leaving, they thought that the opportunity would be created for the insiders, those who had especially started the revolution with Rawlings, you know, to be able also to contest for the leadership position.
Was that your view as well? Would you have preferred that, an insider taking over?
I did not. I would not. Because, you know, the freshness that Professor Mills brought into the NDC was that he was not tainted by the so-called revolutionary excesses. Any of the insiders who emerged as the leader would have attracted the same opprobrium as Rawlings attracted from the opposition. You know, all the baggage, the excess baggage of the revolution would have been part of the campaign. But with Mills, you couldn't do that because he was not part of that era. And I think that actually helped the NDC to rebrand itself and create a new image for itself. And that was why it was possible for us to come back in 2008.
So you are for freshness?
Yes, I was for freshness at the time.
Aren't you still?
Well, because if I say I'm for freshness, then you ask why, then are you bringing Mahama back? So I'm not going to say I'm not going to say I'm for freshness. I'm saying I was for freshness at the time. Yes.
Speaking with Kwame Ahwoi, his book is out, Working with Rawlings. It is packed. And we're learning a little bit about the circumstances around the events described in this book. When we come back, we'll ask Professor Kwame Ahwoi to assess the performance of the PNDC and NDC government in terms of whether they were able to move our nation forward. And then we'll talk about the modern NDC. We'll pick his thoughts on the new ticket, the running mate and flag bearer, and what he considers to be the future of the party. Welcome back. We have rare access to Professor Kwame Ahwoi following the release of his book, Working with Rawlings. It is a revealing set of anecdotes that charts the journey that Professor Ahwoi took with the former President Rawlings as a member of his team that ran this country for at least a couple of decades. Prof, at the end of it, you handed over, first of all, to constitutional rule with pretty much the same team, and then to another party. Now, by the time you handed over to constitutional rule, do you think you and the PNDC had achieved your goals for Ghana?
I wouldn't say we had achieved our goals. If we had achieved our goals, then maybe Ghana would have come to an end. But we had gone a long way in achieving the Ghana that we desired. Let's take the economy, for example. We took over an economy of scarcities, an economy of very low or non-existent foreign exchange, an economy from which people were running away. This was a time when there was a mass exodus of Ghanaians to Nigeria because there was nothing in the country. An economy where the reigning language was one of hoarding, profiteering, selling above control price. In fact, the summary of that system was kalabuli. Yeah. I don't know where it came from. Things were so bad. I talked about hoarding. Many of you don't understand what hoarding is. Hoarding was defined actually in a law, the Subversion Decree, NRC Decree 90. And it was defined as being in possession of goods in excess of your immediate requirements. What that meant is that I don't know if you are married, but if you are a single man and you have 6 tins of milk in your custody, you can't drink 6 tins of milk immediately. So you have milk in excess of your immediate requirements. You are hoarding. You are going to jail.
Wow.
Yes. Another definition was causing or contributing to cause a shortage within the community. A possible interpretation of that is that if you go to a supermarket and there's 1 tin of milk left and you go and buy it, you are going to jail. You have hoarded because by buying that 1 tin of milk, you have caused a shortage in the community. I mean, I could go on and on. It was during budget time. the Minister of Finance would spend close to 2 hours listing the prices of items individually: sardine, milk, kakao, tinapa, this very long list. And if you dared sell 1 peso above that control price, you are going to jail. Half of our prisons was filled with, we call them economic criminals. They were the people who were in jail. Today, I see that you opened your mouth as I talked. You people think that maybe I'm lying, but as the older people, this was the economy that we inherited. Foreign exchange, which you take for granted today, you just walk into a forex bureau and buy foreign exchange. I mean, the word did not even exist in our vocabulary. If you wanted foreign exchange, you went to a place called Zongo Lane, where the foreign exchange was sold under cover of darkness. Occasionally, the military would go and raid the place and arrest the dealers and things like that. All of that we managed to change through certain pragmatic measures and policies that we took.
But to give context, forgive me, to give context, Rawlings actually enforced some of these.
No, when we started, we met them. We met them as the laws. Now, the enforcement we are talking about was in the AFRC period. In the PNDC period, we enforced them for a very short period. And then we realized that there was no way we could continue in that course. So immediately we started, turning back and changing course. And we changed course by 1983. We had started, remember the Economic Recovery Program started in 1983, and that's when we started the changing course. So I think that in the area of the economy, for example, we did remarkably well. Our greatest achievement in the area of politics is the constitution that we have bequeathed to this country. The Fourth Republican Constitution is the only constitution that has lasted more than 1 term. The First Republican Constitution was overthrown in 1966. The Second Republican Constitution came on stream in 1969. It lasted 2 years and 6 months. January 1972, it was overthrown. That's Dr. Buzia. The Third Republican Constitution, Dr. Liman, came on 24th September 1979, 31st December 1981, it was out. This is the only constitution that has lasted more than 1 term. We are now in the 7th government of the Fourth Republic. And therefore, there's something to say for what we have been able to achieve. Because when we were doing it, I mean, it was criticized so much that we had brought butchers and hairdressers to come and write constitutions. And yet that is the constitution that the lawyers and the businessmen are now defending, you know.
What do you say to those who suggest that it was largely designed to protect Rawlings from prosecution and international, vilification following handover?
No, there's only an aspect that criticism is made in relation to the indemnity clauses in the transitional provisions of the Constitution. And there's an explanation for that. When people stage coup d'etat, they know that they have committed the crime of treason, for which the punishment is death. Therefore, if you want those people to hand over smoothly, you have to give them guarantees that they will not be molested, they will not be vilified, they will not even be tried and maybe sentenced to death if they should hand over. Because they will not accept to commit suicide, which is what they will be doing if they simply say, okay, we are handing over. So anytime a coup has taken place in any country, negotiations take place for guarantees of indemnity and immunity to be provided the coup makers. That is the only way they will feel comfortable enough to agree to hand over. And those were the provisions that were inserted in the transitional provisions of the Constitution that people criticize. I know people criticize it a lot. But when they criticize it, their target is Rawlings. But Rawlings is only one. the treason charge extends to those of us who also worked with him. So if the indemnity clauses are removed, not only Rawlings will be tried, I will be tried. President Kufuor will be tried. Because in fact, he was appointed PNDC Secretary for local government before I was appointed a PNDC Secretary.
Yeah.
So if we go in line to be tried, he will come before me. Not only that, the coup makers of 72 will be tried. The coup makers of 66, those of them who are alive, will also be tried. And then there will be a lot of confusion. There will be political instability, etc. So whilst it may not be the best legal formula, it is the best political formula. It's a matter of political pragmatism. Because if you don't do that, then you have to fight the coup makers in order to get them to hand over power.
Does it not go beyond that, though? I mean, is it not also criticized for the fact that it gives perhaps too much power to our presidents?
No, I agree that it gives too much power to the presidency, but that is how the Constitution was designed. Remember, the original proposals from the Committee of Experts Constitution, chaired by Nana Dr. S.K.B. Asante, they recommended the French kind of formula, a president and a prime minister kind of formula, the kind that we had in 1969, so that there will be a split executive between the president and the prime minister. That was rejected by the Consultative Assembly, and they went in for the presidential thing. The problem with the powers that they have given the president is that he is virtually unchallengeable. I mean, he's responsible for virtually everything in the country, and that is, I think, is what is wrong. So if we had gone along with the recommendations of the Professor Fiajo Constitutional Review Commission, you see that they made some recommendations that would have reduced, you know, the power of the president. Their report was issued. Professor Mills issued a white paper, but it has not been implemented yet. You know, President Mahama went a long way towards implementing it. In fact, he submitted the constitutional amendment bills, two of them, entrenched clauses and non-entrenched clauses, to Parliament, but they didn't have time to do it before, you know, the NDC lost power. So it is one of the unfinished businesses of democracy that another government may have to take a look at.
Let's see if we can inch closer to the modern state of the NDC. Following Rawlings, you and a lot of your colleagues put your strength behind Professor Atta Mills, who then became president. Now, if you ask Rawlings today, one of the reasons he will give for his disagreements with the late Professor Mills is that he expected the late professor to prosecute a lot of the people in the NPP government when he took over in 1999.
No, 2009.
Sorry, in 2009, thank you. In 2009. Is there any truth to that?
Yes, and in that, a lot of our people agree with Rawlings. Even I agree with him to a large extent, because if you look at how the NPP is treating the NDC today, since they came to power in 2017, and you are an NDC member, you begin to ask yourself, why was nothing done to the NPP members when the NDC came to power in 2009? And I have the answer, because I was directly in charge of what could have been done, PVOB and I, in charge of the transition team. We built criminal dockets against more than 100 NPP appointees. We had planned for a 5-part series of press conferences to be addressed by Alex Segbefia, who later became Deputy Chief of Staff and later Minister of Health. We had to go and seek President Mills' approval to proceed. I went to him with a brief and everything. After I had finished, he sat back, looked at me and said, we spoke frantic. Kwame, so you want us to do it to them? When When they come back, then they will do it to us. When we come, then we do it to them. Then it will be to-in and fro-in. Then did Ghana go or did Ghana come? Kwame, me, meaning Kwame, I won't do it. That is how the MPP got away with quote and unquote murder. Today they get up and say that if they had done anything wrong, we would have prosecuted them. They don't know that we had a president who said he was an asomdwe and that he was prepared to forget the past in order that we move forward. Many people in the NDC were very, very disappointed. And their disappointment is reflected in Rawlings' anger with President Mills. That even if he had done a quarter of what we think a politician should have done, maybe today's reaction of the MPP would have been different. But because they got away with it, they think that it's business as usual, and so they can continue. But I must tell you, President Mills, that's why some people said that he was not a born politician. He had no business in politics because he didn't have that cutting edge. Because in politics you don't always have to be good. Mills was good, so he assumed that every human being was good. But in politics, there are very bad people. And when you encounter the bad people, you have to deal with them. But because he couldn't see how a human being could be bad, it was very difficult for him to deal with bad people.
Now, you threw your weight behind him. But when he died, God rest his soul, did you throw your weight behind Mahama?
Yes, indeed. In President Mills's biography, which we will launch next year, which I wrote with Kokwenyido, you will see exactly the role that I played, and others also played. Literally, we were the one who, made it possible for the transition from Mills to Mahama to take place so easily. We had to do a lot of things to ensure that. You may want to talk to the Speaker of Parliament at the time, Mrs. Justice, the lady, that was the name, something, and also the Chief Justice at the time, Mrs. Who left before Sufai Kufu took over.
Oh yes, Wood.
We are Georgina
Yes.
Wood. We worked with them on the day that Mills died, and we had to do a lot of work to make it possible for Mahama to be sworn in the night of 24th July. So yes, we threw our weight behind him.
Do you think he was a good president?
He could have been a good president, and he will be a good president from 2021, because I believe that he has learned some lessons from some of the mistakes that he made. I think that the biggest mistake he made at the beginning of his presidency, not when he was finishing off President Mills' time, but at the beginning of his presidency, was to surround himself with people who were not core NDC members. His special advisor or whatever was not, his secretary was not, his secretary to the cabinet was not, so many of them. And so there was a divorce between the government and the party. And therefore, it was not very easy for the party's program to be implemented. To a large extent, it was a program of the bureaucracy that was being implemented, and not the program of the party. But I think halfway through, he realized the problem, and so he changed course. And that's when he brought in Julius Debra as his chief of staff. He brought in what was his name? The deputy something at the AU now. Kotti.
Yes.
Yeah, as a secretary. I mean, yes. He changed his immediately because he realized the problem that had been created. And I think that since we came into position, he has been working with the party people very, very closely. And that's why I think that he will be a very successful president. But even in his presidency, I think that he did very well in terms of development, especially. His development agenda was excellent. But I think it was his handling of the party that created problems for him.
The current ticket John and Jane. There are those who say that this is really your orchestration.
No, it's not my orchestration.
There's a pause
Jane,
there.
no, it's because I have known Jane for a long time. We are actually age mates. We were both born in 1951. I'm only 1 month ahead of her. I was born in October. She was born in November. We entered secondary school together. We left together. I have known her for a long time. In 1996, I was the one who brought her from Cape Coast University to come and interview President Rawlings on Radio Gold. We have been very close together. But she was President Mahama's education minister. She was also my education minister. So if anybody should be a better judge of her as a politician, it should be President Mahama. It's not me. I think that she's President Mahama's choice. It is not time yet. Otherwise, I would reveal to you what I did and who my preferred choice was for the number 2, for the running mate position.
It wasn't Jane?
No, it wasn't Jane. But the moment she was announced, I accepted her because I know she's very good material. And we are also, charting a new course. We are breaking the glass ceiling, as they say. And you can see the confusion that it has caused in the opposition, in the government party camp, because I think this was the last thing that they imagined would happen. But I think that it is a brilliant ticket. Nana is a lady of steel. You don't run a big university like Cape Coast University with all these professors, a medical school, a law faculty, this and all of that. I mean, it takes guts to be able to, manage an institution. It's not even an institution. It's a city. It's a secondary city, because population of Cape Coast University is bigger than most of the secondary cities that we have in Ghana. So she has managerial acumen, and I think she has performed well, and she deserves it. It's a good ticket. I recommend it to Ghanaians.
Now, this is how I'd like us to end. It has been believed for the longest time, and I said it at the beginning, that you are the shadow puppet master of the NDC. That in reality, the party is run from Church Street, where your offices are. Tell us today, is this true?
No, it's not true. Actually, my office is not in Church Street. My office is at a place near the European Union office. We call it Center for Democratic Transitions. But I go to Church Street because Church Street is the office of Ahwoi and the Kwame people. They are the ones who are there. And a lot of the unemployed NDC politicians, they gravitate towards there, to go and discuss national issues, etc., etc. So I won't say that that the party is run from there. Of course, the people there have influence, and so they are consulted when issues come up. But then the flag bearer himself also has his office at cantonments, where you see a lot of NDC bigwigs also congregating. People say that President Rawlings' office and resident at Ridge is also a powerhouse, and so.
But they can't all be.
No,
right?
They can all be. I mean, after all, politics is a matter of consultation. Didn't you realize that when President Mahama was introducing Nana, he said, he had consulted the founder at the Ridge, he had consulted the Council of Elders, he had consulted the FEC, he had consulted the NEC, he consulted all of these. Of course, there are informal consultations that take place also. Maybe he consulted me, but he cannot announce that I consulted Kwame Ahwoi. Who am I? I don't have a position in the party. So even if he consulted me, you wouldn't know. But there is also a lot of informal consultations that go on, including chiefs. Some of the chiefs, the country's big chiefs, they are also consulted, not just by NDC, by both parties, when some of these appointments have to be made. So there's been very wide consultation. But it is not true. I have influence in the party. That is true. I have a lot of influence in the party because of the role I played from day one of the revolution. But it is not the kind of influence that will make me the master puppeteer. No.
working with Rawlings is essential reading?
I have stated in the blurb of the book that Rawlings is an enigma. He is not the ordinary run-of-the-mill leader or president. His style is different. His leadership is different. And therefore, when you have the opportunity to work with a personality like that, you gain experiences that are worth following by others who will come after you. So for me, it was always important to me that I would document my experiences with Rawlings. Now, one of his character traits that I admired, and I've given about 2 examples in the book, for example, was his human relations. And the 2 examples, I don't know if we have time, I'll summarize 2 of them. When he did something that upset me and I resigned, I actually took my letter of resignation to him. I put my letter of resignation on the notice board. He didn't mind me. When I got home in the evening, my wife and the children, then they were young, I think 8, 6, and 4. They were in the most ebullient of moods. They came running towards me. They were happy. Why? They said, President Rawlings had sent word that the next day I should bring them to the castle. He wants to fly us around the country. So, of course, my family was happy. How could I kill their happiness by saying we are not going because I have resigned? So the next morning I took them. He had this small 14-seater Defender aircraft. He put us in it. He piloted it himself with his flight engineer by his side. 3 hours we were in the air. When we came back, he drove us back to the castle. He served them breakfast. And I was just amazed. I didn't see him. I had packed my things from the office. The next day, nobody told me to go back to the office. I went back to the office. I took my things to the office and I continued serving. I had put a notice of my resignation on the notice board. I took it off and put one line that I have rescinded my decision to resign. That was his way of telling me I am sorry without having to utter those words. Because as a military man, you should never say you are sorry to your subordinate. It doesn't happen. But I admired the way that he he worked around me in a way that was really, I said, this man, it was a psychological battle of wills, and clearly he won, And that was it came to him naturally, how he handled human beings. His human relations were really excellent. And when you work with a person like that, I liked him more after that incident, because my family didn't stop talking about it for the next 2 or 3 months, and everybody in their school got to hear that Rawlings had taken them on a flight. Good for the family.
Wow.
So experiences like that needed to be documented so that future heads of state, future ministers, etc. would see that being in leadership position does not mean always cracking the whip. Sometimes there's a certain human approach to relationships that work even better than cracking the whip.
Do you think this book will bring you 2 back together?
If Rawlings reads it, it can bring us together. My fear, however, is that he may not read it. Some people will read it and go and misrepresent the contents to him. I'm saying this because it has happened once before, and Nana Atodazi and I had to come out. This business of some Abacha money, etc.
Yeah.
He gave an interview to a Nigerian newspaper that 2 of his colleagues went and wrote a book on decentralization and said that he had taken money from Abacha, etc. So we came out with a press statement that no, the book we wrote, the 2 of us co-authored, was about Justice Anna. It had nothing to do with decentralization. And in fact, what we said about the Abacha money was so positive. What we said was that the MPP tried to bring it up in Parliament for debate. And Justice Anna worked things in such a way that they could never bring it up for debate. That was all we said in the book about the Abacha money. So we knew, for example, that he had not read it, but somebody had misrepresented, because the Abacha, the Justice Annan book and my decentralization book were both launched in 2010, very close to each other. Yes, and somebody obviously mixed it up and went in. So what I'm saying is that if he reads it himself, it can bring us together.
Do you know the truth about the Abacha money?
Yes, I know. I didn't know about Rawlings saying that he took only the money was 2 million, etc. I didn't know about that, but I do know that some money came from Abacha through his security.
To Rawlings?
Well, to the government. I don't know whether to Rawlings or to the government.
Well, did the government take receipt of it, or did it go to
it didn't come to me, so I wouldn't know. You know,
you're a member of government.
Yes, but I mean, when we sign a loan agreement and it comes, you can't ask the Minister of Youth and Sports to confirm that the money came. He doesn't handle it. He's the Minister of Finance. So in my position as Minister of Local Government, I wasn't handling money.
So you don't know where the money went?
No, I know that the money came. I don't know where it went.
Professor Ahwoi, this has been fascinating. I wish we could go on for longer. In fact, I wish you hadn't written this book in the year 2020, where COVID-19 exists, because I would have loved to shake your hand. Yeah. But we'll save that for a better day, a better year. Thank you so much.
Can I just say something about where this can be purchased?
Please do.
After the launch.
Yes.
After the launch, you can get it Kingdom Bookshop Legon, EPP Bookshop Labadi, Bachona Total Filling Station, Citrus Bookshop ANC Mall, Kingdom Bookshop Usu, Vidya Bookshop Usu, Airport City Shell Filling Station, my own office, CDT, Ghana, is near the European Commission, European Union office, opposite Aquinas Secondary School. Then EPP Bookshop Legon. Then the publishers also sell it online, www.digibookspublishing.com. And then the Holiday Inn Hotel shop at the Airport City.
When is the launch?
Thursday.
Thursday.
Yes.
We'll all be there.
Okay. Thank you very
much.